The moment Tobias told me to get out of my own house, Marina was still standing in the hallway with her arms folded, her eyes gleaming with the cold satisfaction of someone who had finally gotten what she wanted. I can still see the exact angle of her chin, slightly lifted, as if she were daring me to fight back. I had just confronted her about the locked drawer. My drawer, the one she had no business opening, and within minutes she had turned the whole situation into a spectacle of wounded innocence. "Mother, you cannot talk to Marina like that," Tobias said. His voice shook, not with anger, but with a strange mix of panic and compliance. The same tone I had heard whenever Marina fed him another story about how she felt unsafe or judged. I was still holding the folder she had pulled from the drawer. Personal documents, old records, things that were absolutely none of her business. When I demanded to know why she was going through my private files, she threw her hands up like she was being attacked. She actually backed into the wall, covering her face with both palms as if I had lunged at her. "Toby, she's screaming at me," she cried, though my voice had barely risen above a stern question. I stood there stunned. Nothing in my 72 years had prepared me for the audacity of a performance like that. "I am not screaming at you," I said, keeping my tone even. "I am asking why you were in a locked drawer." Marina let out a sob so loud it echoed down the hallway, and she slid dramatically to the floor, as if her legs couldn't support her under the weight of my cruelty. That was when Tobias came running out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel and looking terrified. He didn't look at me like a son looks at his mother. He looked at me like someone stares at a loaded weapon they don't know how to handle. "Mother, what did you do?" he said, rushing to kneel beside her. It was the question that broke something inside me, not because of the words themselves, but because of the instinct behind them. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't ask if I was all right. He didn't ask why she had been in my drawer. He assumed I was the problem. He assumed it without hesitation. I should have walked away. I should have gone to my room, closed the door, and let the storm pass. But something in me snapped and refused to bend this time. Maybe because that locked drawer held documents from the years when I built this house with my own hands. Maybe because it contained pieces of my life that Marina had no right to touch. Or maybe because I could feel her tightening her grip around my son more each day, and I realized this was not going to stop unless I stopped it. "Tobias," I said, steady but firm. "She was going through my private documents." "She was trying to organize," he replied sharply. "She's been helping around the house while you've been overwhelmed." "Overwhelmed?" I repeated. "Since when?" Marina let out a staged, tremulous breath. "You've been forgetting things, Lorraine," she whispered, her voice fragile as spun glass. "We've both been worried about you." I could have laughed at the absurdity if the moment hadn't been so horrifying. Forgetting things? This woman had been in my home for months, slowly inserting herself everywhere, rearranging the kitchen, moving furniture without asking, dictating the grocery list, lecturing me on how to streamline the routines I had followed for decades. But this was different. This was an attack on my mind, on my credibility, on the foundation of everything I had built. "Tobias," I said again, "she is lying." Marina gasped like the word had physically struck her. She clutched Tobias's arm and whispered, "She's scaring me, Toby." And that was when he snapped. "Enough," he said, standing abruptly. His face was flushed, and he pointed toward the front door. "Mother, I cannot let you talk to my wife this way. You need to cool off. You need to leave the house for a while." I stared at him, unable to process what he meant. "Leave? Tobias, this is my home." "It is in my name," he said. And for the first time, I heard the weight of those words not as a simple fact, but as a weapon Marina had finally convinced him to use. "You need to go stay somewhere else until this situation settles." "Are you throwing me out?" I asked quietly, unable to keep the disbelief from my voice. "I'm asking you to leave," he insisted, but what he meant was the same thing. He opened the door and gestured for me to walk out. Marina stood behind him, her face arranged into a careful blend of fragility and righteousness. That was the moment everything inside me shattered. Not loudly, not dramatically. It was a quiet, internal break, the kind that leaves no visible debris but takes years off your life. I grabbed only what I could carry, 2 suitcases I had never thought I would need again. As I stepped outside, Tobias placed my coat on top of the luggage without meeting my eyes. Marina rested her head on his shoulder as if she had been the one wronged. The neighborhood was silent. The clouds were thick and gray, hovering low over the street like they were holding their breath. I loaded the suitcases into my car, my movements stiff, mechanical. Part of me wanted to turn around, to scream, to demand that my own son see what was right in front of him. But I knew better. Some delusions must collapse on their own. When I got into the driver's seat, I took one last look at the home I had designed, not as a structure, but as an extension of myself. Every line, every beam, every window had been placed with intention. I built that house in the early 1990s with my own hands and no shortcuts. For it to be taken from me, even temporarily, felt like a theft of identity. Before I pulled away, I steadied myself. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button. Then, I drove. I didn't know exactly where I was going until I found myself turning toward Reginald's neighborhood. It had been 20 years since we divorced, yet some part of me always knew that if the world ever collapsed, he would be the one person I could still knock on the door of without shame. When he opened it and saw me, suitcases, trembling hands, red eyes, he didn't ask a single question. He didn't demand explanations or apologies. He simply pulled me into a hug that felt like an anchor. "Come in," he said. "This will always be your home too." Maybe that was the moment I realized the depth of what had just happened. Because feeling someone welcome you without hesitation makes you see with painful clarity the cruelty of being pushed out by your own child. That night, after I told him everything, every detail, every insult, every manipulation, Reginald's anger simmered. Not the wild kind, but the focused, deliberate anger of a man who knows injustice when he sees it. "He threw you out of the house you built," he said, "and she orchestrated it. I know her type." "I do not want revenge," I said quietly. "I want my home back, and I want the truth to come out." He nodded. "Then we're not wasting a single day." He called Cassius Drexel the next morning. The name sounded like authority. Sharp, professional, decisive. And when Cassius showed up at Reginald's house for our meeting, I understood why he had the reputation he did. He walked in with a calmness that didn't feel passive. It felt like strategy, like he already saw the shape of the situation before I even began explaining it. I told him about Marina going through my drawer. I told him about the slow erosion of control inside my own house. I told him about Tobias withdrawing from old friends, distancing himself from relatives, parroting Marina's accusations about my mental decline. I told him everything. Cassius took notes rapidly, occasionally asking pointed questions that made me realize he wasn't just gathering information, he was assembling a case. "Has she ever done this before?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "But she's too good at it." He gave a small nod. I was afraid of that. That afternoon, he began digging, and by the end of the week, the first pieces of the truth surfaced. Pieces so dark they made everything click into place. Marina Holt wasn't new to this. She had done it before. 4 times, in 3 different states. Families divided, assets redirected, victims isolated, partners manipulated, and homes, always homes, targeted like trophies. In that moment, the humiliation of being thrown out transformed into something else. Something steadier, colder, but far clearer. Resolve. Resolve not just to reclaim my home, but to reclaim myself. The truth was coming. And the woman who stood smiling on my porch as I drove away had no idea that her final performance was about to begin. When Cassius told me Marina had 4 prior victims scattered across 3 states, I felt something inside my chest crack open. Not in pain, but in recognition. It was as if the truth had been tapping at my door all along, waiting for me to finally let it in. It explained the way she slid so easily into our routines, the way she manipulated Tobias with those breathy declarations of fear or disappointment, the way she moved around my home like a woman rehearsing ownership. The realization came with both relief and sorrow. I was relieved because I finally knew I wasn't losing my mind. But I was sorrowful because my son had been swallowed by something he never had the tools to recognize. Cassius sat calmly at Reginald's kitchen table, tapping his pen against a stack of neatly arranged papers. He always moved with precision, like a man who never wasted time or emotion. He looked at me over the rims of his glasses and said, "Mrs. Whitaker, you are not dealing with an overzealous daughter-in-law. You are dealing with a seasoned predator." The word predator felt heavy, but it fit. It fit so perfectly that I felt chilled by how long I had tried to rationalize Marina's behavior, telling myself she was simply insecure or overly opinionated. But predators don't roar. They whisper, they slide between the cracks of your routines until you forget what life felt like before their presence shifted the temperature of your world. Reginald, who had been pacing the room for the past 10 minutes, slammed his hand against the counter, not in anger at me, but in outrage at the situation. "She used our son," he said. "She used our home, and she threw Lorraine out like she was nothing." His voice wavered at that last word. Nothing. It was the word that burned the most, even though Tobias had never spoken it aloud. He didn't have to. His actions had said it for him. Cassius leaned back and folded his hands. "I want to be clear. This is not only about reclaiming the house. This is about exposing a repeated pattern of elder financial exploitation. And in your case, the psychological manipulation is particularly severe." He flipped open a folder and revealed a page filled with names, dates, and notes. Marina has used different last names in the past, but the behaviors are identical. She inserts herself into the home, isolates the vulnerable party, convinces the partner that she is the one in danger, and then positions herself for financial gain, often through deception, forgery, or coercion. Hearing it laid out so plainly made my stomach turn, and yet it also stirred a quiet resolve. I had not imagined this. I had not overreacted. I had been targeted. I took a long breath, letting the air settle in my lungs like I was relearning how to breathe. "What do we do next?" I asked. My voice came out stronger than I expected. Cassius began listing the steps with methodical clarity. "First, we gather every piece of evidence you can remember. Dates, incidents, small details, anything Marina said or did that seemed off. Next, we acquire statements from friends or relatives who witnessed her behavior. Then, we will file for an injunction, report the breach of privacy, and begin a formal investigation into her past cases. When the time is right, law enforcement will be involved." Reginald nodded vigorously. "We'll get whatever you need." I looked down at my hands that had once drawn the first sketches of my house, hands that built shelves, sanded wood, planted trees, repaired fixtures, hands that raised a child. They didn't feel weak. They didn't feel old. They felt ready. That night, in the guest room at Reginald's house, I sat with a notebook and tried to remember the earliest signs, the red flags I had ignored because I wanted peace more than I wanted accuracy. Marina's charm had been polished. She smiled too widely at Tobias's jokes, laughed with a softness that felt practiced, and clung to him as if he were the only thing tethering her to the world. I had mistaken that for love. Now I knew it was strategy. I wrote down the day she insisted on reorganizing my pantry without asking. Tobias had praised her for it, calling it helpful. But I remembered how she watched my reaction, the way her eyes narrowed slightly when I said I preferred things the way they were. That was the first time she implied I was set in my ways, and Tobias laughed as if it were a harmless joke. Then there was the afternoon she followed me outside as I trimmed the garden hedges. She told me she worried that I was pushing myself at my age. At the time, I brushed it off. But now, remembering the condescending tilt of her head, I saw it clearly. She had been building a narrative. Slowly, patiently, deliberately. The most chilling memory came from a quiet evening 3 months earlier. I had been reading in the living room when I overheard Marina whispering to Tobias in the kitchen. "I'm just worried about her," she said. "She snaps at me sometimes. I think she might be overwhelmed." "Mother doesn't snap," Tobias replied in a hushed voice. "Well, she does with me," Marina insisted. "Maybe she feels threatened by having another woman in the house. Older women sometimes get like that." I froze in my chair. My book slipped from my lap. I had never snapped at her, not once. But she was planting seeds, watering them with the tears she could summon on command. And Tobias, sweet, conflict-avoidant Tobias, was fertile ground for manipulation. As I wrote in the notebook, the pages filled quickly. More details surfaced. The way Marina always volunteered to pick up the mail. The way she insisted on handling certain bills to take pressure off me. The way she told Tobias I had misplaced keys or forgotten conversations that never existed. It was not forgetfulness on my part. It was erasure on hers. By the time I closed the notebook that night, exhaustion weighed on me. But it was not the draining exhaustion of defeat. It was the steady, grounded exhaustion of someone who had begun reclaiming the narrative of her own life. Cassius called early the next morning. "I need you to come to my office," he said. "We have developments." Reginald drove us downtown. The streets of Richmond always had a certain rhythm in the morning. Shops opening, delivery trucks humming, joggers passing by with earbuds in. I had lived here long enough to know each season's cadence. Yet on that morning, the city felt sharper, more alert, as if it knew the truth was finally surfacing. Cassius greeted us with a folder so thick it looked like a small textbook. "I found the first legal trail," he said. One of Marina's previous victims filed a police report in North Carolina, but withdrew it after pressure from her partner. Another case in Pennsylvania involved allegations of forgery and identity manipulation, but the charges were never proven. "Why not?" I asked. "Because Marina left before they could finish investigating," he said. "She is very good at disappearing when things get too close." A shiver ran down my spine. I pictured her calmly packing up her things, leaving behind chaos without a single backward glance, moving on to the next unsuspecting family. But this time, she had underestimated her target. She had entered the home of a woman who had built her life from the ground up, including the house she tried to take. And she had provoked a mother who, despite heartbreak, still had a spine of steel beneath the grief. "I want to interview Tobias as soon as possible," Cassius said. "But not yet. If we approach him now, he will warn her, and she will run." Reginald crossed his arms. "So what do we do?" Cassius smiled with an almost imperceptible edge. "We watch, we document, we prepare, and when she least expects it, we strike." It was the first time I felt genuinely hopeful since being thrown out. Over the next several days, we built a timeline so detailed it could have been used to write a biography. I provided every memory, every conversation, every instance of her trying to undermine my authority in my own home. Cassius collected everything with precision, cross-referencing dates, connecting patterns, following financial trails. Meanwhile, Reginald became my shadow. He drove me to every meeting, every appointment, every errand. He cooked for me. He listened. He reminded me that I was not fighting this alone. There was a tenderness in his actions that felt familiar, like the remnants of the bond we once shared. Not romantic, not nostalgic, something deeper, a kind of respect that had endured 2 decades of separation. One evening, as we sat at his dining table sorting through paperwork, he paused and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since our 20s. "Lorraine," he said softly, "you did not deserve any of this." "I know," I said, and for the first time, I truly meant it. The next breakthrough came when Cassius obtained security footage from a convenience store where Marina had cashed a check months earlier. The signature on the back was not hers. It was mine. Except I had never signed that check. When Cassius placed the printout in front of me, the room tilted slightly. Not from shock, I had long since accepted the depths of her manipulation, but from the realization that she had not only invaded my privacy, she had impersonated me. Forgery. Elder fraud, intent to defraud. Cassius's eyes gleamed with the sharpness of a man who had just found the missing cornerstone of a case. "This," he said, tapping the paper, "is enough to initiate formal proceedings." I sat back and exhaled, the sound shaky but freeing. Marina was not simply cruel, she was criminal. While Cassius prepared the legal motions, Reginald encouraged me to do something other than worry. "You need your mind to be strong when the final confrontation comes," he said. "So take a walk. Visit the river. Go somewhere quiet and breathe." I followed his advice. I walked along the James River shoreline, feeling the crisp wind brush against my skin. The water moved with patient force, steady and unbothered by obstacles. I found strength in its rhythm. It reminded me that erosion does not happen overnight, and neither does restoration. But both are inevitable when the conditions are right. As I stood there watching the current glide past, I realized something unexpected. I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like a woman gathering momentum. A week after my exile, Cassius called again. His voice held a tone I had not heard before. "Lorraine," he said, "we are almost ready. But before we move forward, there is one last thing you need to know." My breath caught. "What is it?" "It concerns your son." The world seemed to pause. A gull shrieked overhead. Leaves rustled behind me. My pulse thudded in my ears. "Go on," I said. "Tobias has taken money from your account," Cassius said. "Significant amounts, under Marina's direction." The wind cut sharply across my face, but the real blow came from inside. My son, my only child. The boy I raised with patience, discipline, and devotion. The boy I supported through every struggle. The boy who had once cried into my shoulder when he felt lost in the world. He had taken from me. He had participated. Whether knowingly or under her manipulation, the result was the same: betrayal. I swallowed hard and forced myself to stay standing. "How much?" I asked. Cassius told me. My legs nearly gave out. I had expected Marina to steal from me, but I had not expected Tobias to sign his name next to the theft. When I finally spoke, my voice felt unfamiliar, hollow yet steady. "We continue," I said, "no matter where this leads." Cassius exhaled softly as if he had been unsure whether I would have the strength. "I am with you through all of it." When I returned to Reginald's house that evening, he saw the change in my eyes before I even opened my mouth. "Lorraine," he said gently, "what happened?" I sat down and told him everything. Every detail, every number, every betrayal. He listened in silence, his face a mixture of fury and sorrow. When I finished, he placed his hand over mine. "Your son is blind," he said quietly, "but he is not evil. Not at his core. Marina twisted him, and when the truth comes out, he will have to face what he allowed himself to become." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe there was something left in Tobias worth salvaging. But the truth was not gentle. It cut without mercy. For the next several days, the investigation accelerated. Cassius gathered sworn statements, forensic accountants traced the money, and law enforcement began drafting warrants. Everything was aligning for Marina's downfall. But before that happened, something else needed to take place, something I had not anticipated, something that would change the course of everything. Tobias showed up. Not with Marina, not with anger, not with accusations. He arrived alone. He knocked on Reginald's door with trembling hands and tear-swollen eyes. When I opened it and saw my son standing there, broken, remorseful, terrified, I realized the next chapter of this story wouldn't be about Marina at all. It would be about him, and about whether forgiveness was possible between a mother and a son carved apart by manipulation. When I saw Tobias standing on Reginald's porch, his shoulders hunched and his eyes swollen as if he had not slept in days, something inside me tightened. Not in fear, not in anger, but in that old, weary place where mothers store every disappointment, every hope, every unanswered question. He looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of the past week had pressed him inward. There was a tremor in his hands, and his breath came in shallow bursts, the way it used to when he was a boy, trying not to cry after scraping his knee. "Mother," he said, but the word fractured in the middle, like he wasn't sure he had the right to use it anymore. I stepped aside silently, letting him enter. Reginald appeared from the kitchen doorway, his expression unreadable. He had always been the steadier one between the two of us, but even he had trouble hiding the anger simmering behind his calm mask. Tobias didn't meet his eyes. He could barely meet mine. He walked into the living room and stood awkwardly, as if unsure whether he was welcome to sit, unsure whether this house, this neutral ground, could offer him any mercy. "I didn't know where else to go," he finally whispered. "You came to the right place," I said, though my voice felt fragile, as if it had been rearranged by the events of the past week. The silence stretched between us, thick enough to muffle the ticking clock on the wall. Tobias looked down at his hands, rubbing them together like he was trying to scrub something off his skin. "Marina left," he said abruptly. "She disappeared 2 nights ago." My pulse quickened, though not with surprise. Marina had always moved like a shadow, slipping into the edges of our lives until we mistook her presence for inevitability. Leaving without warning was exactly the kind of move a woman like her would make when she sensed consequences approaching. "When?" I asked. "After we argued," he said, voice wavering. "She was packing a bag before midnight, said she needed space, said she needed to reflect. I thought she'd be back in the morning, but she never came home." He swallowed hard. "And then I got a call from the bank." Reginald shifted, crossing his arms. What did they say? Tobias flinched at the question, then spoke with difficulty, as if each word scraped against his throat. They wanted to confirm some activity on your accounts. Transfers. Payments made with your signature. He looked up at me, shame flooding his face. Mother, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I thought I was helping her. She said she was organizing things for you. She said you needed help staying on top of things. The old me, the me from before Marina arrived, might have softened instantly. I might have rushed to assure him that he was forgiven. But the woman who now stood before him had been changed. Not hardened, not cold, but awakened. And awakenings don't allow you to ignore what's right in front of you. Sit down, I said, and he sank into the couch like a man awaiting judgment. I sat across from him, clasping my hands in my lap to keep them steady. Why didn't you question her? I asked. Why didn't you come to me? He looked shattered by the simplicity of the question. Because she made me feel like if I didn't trust her, I was failing her. And she said you were overwhelmed. She said you were stressed and forgetting things, and I? His face crumpled as he leaned his elbows on his knees. I believed her. Reginald remained quiet, letting the weight of Tobias's confession fall between us without cushioning it. He understood as well as I did that Tobias needed to face the truth directly without being shielded by our instinct to protect him. You didn't just believe her, I said, my voice steady. You defended her. You dismissed me. You threw me out of my own home. Tobias squeezed his eyes shut, a tear sliding down his cheek before he could wipe it away. I know, he whispered, and I hate myself for it. That admission stirred something deep inside me. Not forgiveness, but a painful, necessary crack in the wall I had built to protect myself. But that doesn't excuse what you did, I continued. You have to understand that. I do, he said immediately, desperate for me to believe him. I do. I swear. I've been replaying that moment over and over. The look on your face, the way you asked me if I was throwing you out. I can't get it out of my head. He covered his face with both hands, shoulders shaking. I don't know how I became that person. I don't know how I let her get into my head. I let the silence sit for a moment. Pain can be an honest teacher, and Tobias was finally listening to the lessons. You didn't just let her in, I said. You invited her in. You handed her the authority she needed to manipulate you, and she used it. But that doesn't make your actions harmless. He nodded, tears falling freely now. I want to make it right. I'll do anything. Making it right isn't about doing anything, I said gently. It's about doing the correct thing, and sometimes that involves accepting the consequences. He stiffened slightly as if bracing for impact. What consequences? Cassius had instructed me not to reveal everything until the legal proceedings were already in motion. But I needed to know whether Tobias had the capacity to hear what was coming, whether confronting the truth would break him or help him rebuild. So instead of answering his question directly, I asked, Do you want to be honest with me? Truly honest? Yes, he whispered, more than anything. Then tell me, I said, leaning forward. When Marina asked you to sign my name on those documents, did you know it was wrong? His flinch told me everything. He bowed his head, voice cracking. She said it was just to help you. She said you were too stressed and needed support. She said you were struggling with organization. She made it seem like it was for your benefit. And I didn't want to upset her. I didn't want to make her feel like I doubted her. A small, sharp ache pierced my chest. You doubted me, I said simply. He sobbed silently, shoulders trembling. I know, he choked out. I know, and I'm so sorry. Reginald finally spoke, his voice low but firm. Tobias, being manipulated doesn't make you evil, but refusing to take responsibility would. Tobias nodded helplessly. I'll do whatever it takes. I studied him for a long time, seeing not the man he had become through Marina's influence, but the boy he once was. The boy who brought me wildflowers after breaking a neighbor's window. The boy who cried in my lap on his first day of school because the world felt too big. The boy who once said he wanted to build houses like I did. But pain shapes people differently, and Tobias had allowed himself to be shaped by a woman who saw him not as a partner, but as a tool. You understand, I said quietly, that this will go to court. He looked up sharply. Court? Yes, Marina committed crimes, and you participated in some of them, whether knowingly or not. His skin went pale, the color draining from his face until he looked ghost-like. "But Mother," I held up a hand gently, "let me finish. This isn't about punishing you. This is about holding the right people accountable and protecting others from her. You became a part of something dangerous, and breaking free of it means facing that truth." He swallowed hard. "Will I go to jail?" The boy inside him surfaced in that moment, terrified and small. "That depends," I said carefully. "On your honesty, your cooperation, and whether you take responsibility instead of hiding behind excuses." He nodded slowly, his breath uneven. "I'll tell them everything, whatever they need. I won't protect her." That was the first real step he had taken since this nightmare began. I saw it, I acknowledged it, but I did not let it erase the past. "Good," I said softly, "because the investigation is already underway." His eyes widened in shock. "Already? You started without talking to me?" "You threw me out," I replied calmly. "You made your position clear. I had to protect myself." "I understand," he whispered, voice breaking again. "I understand why you did it." He sat back, deflated, exhausted, but more honest than I had seen him in months. "We can fix this," he said, though the fear in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. "Can't we?" "We can do what is right," I said. "That's all anyone can promise." Hours passed as we talked through pieces of the past, moments he hadn't recognized as manipulation until now. He described how Marina alternated between affection and rejection, how she offered him praise only when he took her side, how she insinuated herself as the arbiter of his choices. He admitted how flattered he had been by her attention, how relieved he felt whenever she told him he was a good husband for protecting her from imagined threats. "She made me feel necessary," he confessed. "Like without me, she'd fall apart." "That wasn't love," I said softly. "That was control." He nodded with a rawness that made him seem younger than his 40 years. "I know that now, but I didn't see it before." "Most people don't," I said. "That's why people like her get away with this." Reginald sat beside me, his presence solid and steady, offering support without overshadowing my voice. Tobias watched him nervously, aware that the man who had once been his father figure now saw him through a lens clouded with disappointment. "Your mother will get her home back," Reginald finally said. "But you have to understand something important, Tobias." Tobias straightened, bracing himself. "This is her battle, not yours. You do not get to stand beside her in this process until you have proven you're capable of standing on your own." The words landed like a stone. Tobias nodded, absorbing the truth. "I understand," he said hoarsely. "I know I'm not entitled to anything, least of all her forgiveness." His eyes moved to mine, searching, not for absolution, but for the chance to earn it. I didn't give him an answer. Some truths need to be lived, not spoken. When Tobias finally left that evening, he looked like a man walking away from the wreckage of a life he hadn't realized he had helped destroy. He promised to contact Cassius, to cooperate fully, to accept whatever came next. And when the door closed behind him, I let out a breath I didn't know I had been holding. "He's broken," I said quietly. "He needed to break," Reginald replied. "Now he can rebuild." I walked to the window, watching Tobias's car disappear down the street. The ache inside me was deep, but underneath it something else stirred, a pulse of clarity, of certainty. The storm was still coming. The truth was still unfolding. And Marina Holt's reckoning was closer than she knew. But more importantly, I realized something profound as I stood there in the quiet of Reginald's home. This battle was no longer about defending what was taken from me. It was about reclaiming the woman I had been before manipulation walked through my door. And nothing, not betrayal, not grief, not fear, was going to stop me now. In the days following Tobias's visit, the atmosphere around me shifted in subtle but undeniable ways. It was as if the world finally acknowledged what had been simmering in silence for months. The truth was no longer hiding in the shadows. It was moving, slowly, steadily, toward exposure. And I, after being cast out of my own home, had begun reclaiming something far more important than walls and a roof. I was reclaiming the woman I had always been beneath the bruises of betrayal. Cassius called early the next morning, his voice brisk, purposeful. "Lorraine, we're ready for the next phase," he said. "Law enforcement has reviewed the documentation. There will be a warrant for Marina's arrest as soon as we confirm her location." "Do you know where she is?" I asked. There was a pause. a measured one, the kind Cassius used when he was choosing his words carefully. We have leads. She used 2 credit cards last night. Both were declined due to suspicious activity. One in Maryland, one in Delaware. I stood at the kitchen counter, gripping the edge to steady myself. She's running. She's trying to, he corrected. People like Marina don't know how to stay still, and that is exactly why she eventually gets caught. Reginald had been listening from the dining table, leaning back with his arms crossed. What do you need from us? For now, Cassius said, I need Lorraine to review the affidavit before I submit the final version. Once the arrest is made, she will need to be prepared for statements, possibly interviews. And Tobias, assuming he follows through, will also need to sit with investigators. The mention of Tobias brought a tightness to my chest, a blend of dread and sorrow and hesitant hope. I'll be there within the hour, I said. Reginald drove me downtown, his presence steady beside me. He didn't try to fill the silence, didn't offer platitudes, didn't try to soothe the wounds still raw in my heart. He simply drove, giving me the dignity of quiet strength. Sometimes support doesn't need to be loud, it simply needs to exist. Cassius greeted us in his office with a thick stack of documents, each page a thread in the web Marina had spun around my life. The affidavit was long, detailed, precise. He walked me through each section, her unauthorized entry into my locked drawer, the forged check she had cashed, the pattern of isolation and manipulation, the prior victims now coming forward. You understand, he said carefully, that once this is filed, things will move quickly. This is not a civil matter anymore. It is criminal. I nodded. I want this done right. He studied me for a moment. Most people in your position would be overwhelmed. I was, I admitted, but I'm not anymore. The moment I said it, I realized how true it was. Something had shifted. The woman who had driven away from her home with tears in her eyes had been replaced by someone purposeful, someone clear, someone who would never again ignore the first tug of her intuition. After I signed the final page, Cassius gathered everything with a quiet efficiency. We'll move as soon as we have confirmation on her location, he said. In the meantime, there's another matter we need to address. Your house. Those 2 words made my heart stutter. My house. The place that had felt like an extension of my own heart for decades. The place from which I had been exiled so violently and humiliatingly. What about it? I asked. It needs to be secured, Cassius said. Once Marina realizes she has been exposed, she may try to retrieve personal items, evidence, or even attempt to destroy documents inside. And Tobias is currently living there alone, correct? Yes. Then we need to coordinate a visit, he said, with law enforcement present if necessary. I felt my pulse quicken. Return to the house? Already? My mind flashed back to the moment Tobias closed the door in my face, to Marina's smirk as she watched me pack my life into 2 suitcases. Returning would not be simple. It would not be clean, but it would be necessary. When? I asked. Tomorrow morning, Cassius said. We need to act before she does. Reginald reached over and placed a warm, grounding hand over mine. You're not doing this alone, he said. I'll be with you. I nodded, grateful for the strength in his voice. That night, I barely slept. Not from fear, not from anticipation, but from the strange electric feeling of standing on the edge of something long overdue. Justice is not just a process, it's a shift in the air. You feel it coming before it arrives, like the tremor before a thunderstorm. The next morning, we met Cassius outside the house, my house. The sky was gray, heavy with clouds, mirroring the weight in my chest. Tobias opened the door before Cassius could knock. He looked exhausted, as if he had aged years in a week. His hair was disheveled, dark circles etched beneath his eyes. Mother, he said softly, stepping aside to let us in. Crossing the threshold felt like stepping into a memory that had been bruised. The entryway smelled faintly of the lavender oil I always used on the floorboards. My framed sketches still hung on the walls. The sunlight still filtered through the front windows in long, golden lines. Yet the space felt hollow, like the house itself had been holding its breath since my departure. Tobias led us to the living room. Papers were scattered across the coffee table. Bills, opened envelopes, discarded notes written in Marina's looping handwriting. Tobias glanced at the mess with shame. I haven't touched anything, he said. I didn't know what would matter for the investigation. Cassius nodded approvingly. That was the right choice. We spent the next hour combing through the house, document drawers, files, notes left on the refrigerator, even the digital calendar on the kitchen counter. Cassius photographed everything meticulously, his methodical process giving me a sense of distance from the emotional weight of being inside the home again. But when we reached my studio, the room where I had designed every detail of this house, the air shifted. My drafting table was still in the center of the room, but the tools had been moved. My pencils, rulers, sketches, all rearranged. The disruption was subtle, but I felt it instantly, like someone had touched my pulse without consent. Marina spent a lot of time in here, Tobias said quietly. I turned to him sharply. Why? She said she wanted to learn about architecture, he sang, creeping back into his voice. She said it would help her connect with you. I felt a bitter taste rise in my mouth. Marina had never been interested in connecting with me. She had been studying me, studying the house, studying the layout, the structure, the vulnerabilities. Cassius approached one of my filing drawers. May I? He asked. Go ahead. He pulled it open carefully, flipping through old sketches and documents. After a moment, he paused and held up a folder. What is this? He asked. I stepped closer and froze. Inside the folder were scanned copies of my original architectural plans, annotated in handwriting that wasn't mine. Notes outlining valuations, structural reinforcements, and market comparisons. There were also printed emails between Marina and a realtor I didn't recognize, discussing potential sale prices, renovation strategies, and estimates for occupant relocation. Occupant relocation. My throat tightened. She was going to sell it, I whispered. She was planning to sell my home. Tobias staggered back as if the words had punched him. No, he said. No, she wouldn't. She wouldn't do something like... She would, I said firmly. She already did. Cassius laid the documents on the table. This is concrete evidence, he said. She was preparing to remove you entirely. The room felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls were leaning in. I had known Marina wanted control, but I had not realized how far her intentions had stretched. Not just manipulation, not just isolation. She had intended to erase my presence from this house completely. Tobias covered his mouth with his hand, sinking into a chair. His voice shook when he finally spoke. Mother, how did I not see this? How could I have let her? I knelt beside him, placing a hand on his arm. Because manipulation is a slow poison, I said quietly. You don't realize how much it's changed you until someone finally stops the flow. He lowered his head into his hands, sobbing silently. By the time Cassius collected all the evidence, the weight of what we had discovered felt too dense to process fully. But one thing had become clear. Marina had never been improvising. She had been executing a plan that had ended the moment I walked out of this house with my suitcases. After leaving the house, we stopped by the precinct so Cassius could submit the documents. I watched as he placed everything on the officer's desk, his posture radiating certainty. Once she's located, he told me, she will be arrested immediately. That night, Reginald prepared dinner, though I barely tasted any of it. My mind kept drifting back to the annotated plans, the realtor emails, the calculated notes. She had been dismantling my life with the thoroughness of someone renovating a building brick by brick. As I sat in Reginald's living room, the phone rang. Cassius. We found her, he said. She's in New Jersey. She tried to check into a hotel using a forged ID. The police have her in custody. I closed my eyes, letting the words sink into me like warm water. The charges, I asked. Forgery, financial exploitation, identity theft, intent to commit fraud, elder abuse, and interstate flight from investigation, he said. And that's only the beginning. I felt something inside me loosen, a tension I had carried like a knot in my spine for months, maybe years. Marina was no longer a ghost haunting my memories. She was contained, stopped, exposed. When will the hearing be? I asked. Within the next few days, he said. And Tobias will need to be present. I understand. When I hung up, I sat still for a long time. Reginald watched me carefully, giving me the space to absorb the moment. Finally, I whispered, "It's over." He shook his head gently. "No," he said, "it's beginning. Your healing, your return, your reclamation." He was right, because justice, no matter how satisfying, is not the end of a story. It is the doorway into the next chapter. And as I sat there, feeling the weight of the past fall away piece by piece, I realized I was ready. Ready to walk back into my home, not as a victim, not as someone cast out, but as a woman who had fought for the truth and won. Tobias had his own battle ahead, but mine, finally, was shifting toward victory. And soon, the entire world would see the truth of what Marina Holt had done. The morning of the hearing arrived with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in months, the kind of quiet that signals something decisive is about to unfold. I stood in front of the mirror in Reginald's guest room, smoothing the front of my navy dress, the one I used to wear when I met with clients during my final years as an architect. My hair, silver and soft, framed my face in waves. For the first time since Tobias threw me out, I saw myself clearly, not as a woman wounded by betrayal, not as someone pushed aside, but as the version of myself I always respected, firm, composed, steady. Reginald stepped into the doorway, adjusting his tie. "You ready?" he asked. "Yes," I said. And for once, I truly meant it. We drove to the courthouse in silence, letting the gravity of the day settle over us. The streets of Richmond were just beginning to come alive. The soft hum of morning traffic, people walking briskly to work, the smell of roasted coffee drifting from the cafe on the corner. Life moved forward, unaware of the gravity inside my chest. But I felt ready. Not because it was easy, not because the hurt had faded, but because clarity has a way of replacing fear with purpose. Inside, the building buzzed with quiet conversations and the shuffle of papers. Cassius awaited us at the entrance to the courtroom, crisp suit, composed expression, eyes sharp with focus. "Today," he said, "you get your closure." "And justice," Reginald added. "Yes," Cassius said, nodding. Justice. Tobias arrived moments later. He looked exhausted, pale, hollow-eyed, his clothing wrinkled as if he hadn't slept. He approached slowly, hesitant, like a child unsure whether he is invited into the room. "Mother," he whispered, "thank you for letting me be here." "You needed to be here," I said simply, "for the truth, for yourself, and for everyone your choices affected." He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. When the courtroom doors opened, we took our seats, me between Cassius and Reginald, Tobias one row behind. I could feel his presence, weighted with guilt, remorse, and hope that some part of this day might lead toward repair. Then she entered. Marina. Her hands were cuffed. Her hair, once meticulously styled, hung limp around her face. Her eyes darted around the room with a mixture of defiance and panic. She wore no makeup, no charm, no pretense. And for the first time since she entered my life, I saw her without the mask she used to manipulate the world. Our eyes met. For a split second, I saw something flicker in her expression. Recognition, disdain, maybe even surprise that I was standing so firmly, so completely, so unapologetically myself. She looked away quickly, jaw tightening. She had built her confidence on the belief that her victims wouldn't fight back. But this time, she was wrong. The judge entered, and everyone rose. The hearing began with formalities, charges, procedures. The list of allegations against her was long: fraud, forgery, identity theft, elder exploitation, financial abuse, interstate evasion of investigation. Each count sounded like a nail driven into the coffin of her freedom. Cassius presented the evidence with precision. He showed the forged signatures, the recordings, the annotated architectural plans, the emails to realtors, the money transfers. He laid out her history with the other families, details she had surely hoped were buried forever. At one point, Marina shifted in her seat, her composure cracking. Her breathing quickened, her jaw clenched tightly enough that I imagined she could have shattered her own teeth. And then came the testimony. Cassius called me first. I approached the stand calmly, my hands steady as I placed them on the railing. I spoke clearly, truthfully, without embellishment. I told them what happened the day she searched my drawer, how she manipulated my son, how she moved through my home like someone planning to own it. I recounted the moment Tobias threw me out, how Marina watched from the porch with a smile she didn't bother to hide. When I described the feeling of being exiled from my own home, the courtroom was silent. I saw a few people shift in their seats, uncomfortable with the cruelty of that moment. But I didn't tremble. I didn't cry. I told the truth exactly as it happened. Then it was Tobias's turn. He stood slowly, his shoulders heavy with the burden of his own failings. His voice cracked as he described how Marina isolated him, how she convinced him I was slipping mentally, how she turned every disagreement into a crisis requiring his protection. He admitted how ashamed he was to have signed documents at her instruction, believing he was helping me. He couldn't bring himself to look at me while he spoke. But his honesty, raw, painful, unfiltered, was a step toward redemption. When he finished, the judge asked him a final question. "Mr. Whitaker, do you believe your mother was exploited?" Tobias nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Yes," he whispered, "and I let it happen." Marina shifted violently in her chair, glaring at him with contempt so sharp it could have sliced skin. She had lost control of her puppet, and she hated that more than any charge being read aloud. Then came her turn. When she rose to speak, her facade cracked like brittle glass. She tried to slip into the soft, trembling voice she once used to manipulate Tobias. But it rang false, not only because the room was filled with evidence, but because the mask had already shattered. "I didn't mean to harm anyone," she said, voice wavering. "I was overwhelmed. Tobias and our marriage was struggling. I was under pressure." Cassius stood. "Your Honor, the evidence disproves that narrative." The judge agreed. The hearing concluded with the judge setting bail at an amount Marina could never afford. She was taken back into custody immediately. As the officers escorted her out, she looked at me again, but this time there was no smirk, no superiority, no confidence, only fear. Fear of consequences, fear of being seen, fear of the truth finally catching up. Once the doors closed behind her, the tension in my chest eased. Not completely, but enough to remind me that justice had finally taken its rightful place. Outside the courthouse, Tobias approached me cautiously. The wind carried the scent of approaching rain, and the gray sky mirrored the mixture of relief and grief swirling inside him. "Mother," he said softly, "I know today wasn't easy for you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I am going to earn back your trust. If it takes years, I'll do it." I studied him, the regret in his eyes, the weight he carried, the sincerity trembling in his voice. Forgiveness is a complicated thing. It isn't a gift you hand over lightly. It's a door you unlock slowly, deliberately. "I believe you want to change," I said, "but that isn't enough. You need to work on yourself. Grow, learn, accountability, responsibility. You are 40 years old. You must rebuild your own life, not lean on mine." He nodded tearfully. "I understand." "And Tobias," I added gently but firmly, "you can visit. You can call. You can rebuild a relationship with me. But you will not live with me again. This time, you build your own foundation." He wiped his face and whispered, "Thank you, Mother." We hugged, hesitant at first, then tighter. It wasn't the restoration of the past. It was the fragile beginning of something new. When Reginald and I returned home, my home, it felt different, warmer, stronger. I stood in the entryway and let the familiarity wash over me. My architectural sketches, my shelves, my light, my lines. Everything felt like it had waited for me to return. "You look lighter," Reginald said softly. "I feel lighter," I replied. We walked through each room together, making sure nothing was out of place. But more than that, we allowed ourselves to remember who we had been in this house decades ago. Partners, co-creators, dreamers. Life had taken us in different directions, but the foundation remained. Later that evening, as we shared a quiet dinner, he reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "You know," he said, "life rarely gives people second chances, but sometimes when the storm clears, what's left standing is stronger than before." I smiled. "Are you talking about the house?" I asked, "or about us?" He chuckled softly. "Maybe both." We didn't rush anything. We didn't romanticize the moment, but we acknowledged something real, something gentle, mature, and grounded. A connection rediscovered not through nostalgia, but through resilience. Over the next weeks, the investigation continued, but my life felt new. I reconnected with friends. I restored my studio. I took long walks by the James River, breathing in the quiet strength of the water. I joined a community group focused on elder protection and housing advocacy, and I found myself helping others who had been manipulated the way I had been. My story was no longer a weight, it was a tool. Reginald and I grew closer, not as the couple we once were, but as the people we had become. Older, wiser, more patient, more appreciative. There was no hurry, no pressure, just companionship strong enough to weather anything. One afternoon, Tobias visited. He had begun therapy. He was working a steady job again. He apologized, genuinely humbly, and asked if he could help repair the garden he once neglected. I agreed, and as he pulled weeds and trimmed the hedges, I felt something soften, not forgiveness in full, but the slow, steady rebuilding of trust. When he left, he hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mother," he said. I love you too, I replied. And this time, the words didn't hurt, they healed. Months later, the case concluded. Marina accepted a plea agreement, years of prison time, restitution, and mandatory counseling. Her days of slipping through the cracks were finally over. And I reclaimed everything she tried to steal. Not just the house, not just my dignity, but the woman I was before the betrayal. The woman who rose after the storm. Now, as I sit in my studio with sunlight pouring across my drafting table, I think about everything that happened. The betrayal, the exile, the return, the truth. And I realize something. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to disappear. I survived, I rebuilt, I reclaimed my life, and I hope my story reminds others, especially mothers, especially older women, that boundaries are not barriers, they are lifelines. That kindness is powerful, but clarity is essential. That love and self-respect can exist in the same breath. And now, before I close, I want to ask you something from the heart. What would you have done in my place? Tell me where you're listening from. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to support more stories like this, you can also use Super Thanks. It truly helps. With heartfelt greetings, until next time.